My name is Ariel, and today we're doing a live app teardown session. In case you don't know what an app teardown is, it's my process of going through an app and seeing what it's doing right and what it's doing wrong on the App Store or Google Play to get more visibility through App Store optimization. And I will go today through 2 apps. We've tried to do 3 before. I think 2 is probably a better number, so I don't have to rush. With the idea of 1, showing you my process, so you can use it on your apps, on your customers' apps, on your clients' apps, if you're doing consulting, and also so you can see the kind of things that I look for. So not just how I do it, but what I do when I go through an app. What do my eyes immediately get attracted to? What's good? What's bad? What can be improved? Along the way, I will share any tips that I have that I use on when I do this myself, and also I'll highlight good things that I see in the apps that I will do the teardowns for. The apps themselves came directly from user submissions. There was a link in the invitation email and also in the Zoom invitation, where you signed up for this. And there's so many that I had to take 2 random. I would love to do all of them, and I always say that, but with every webinar, we just get more and more. So I tried to be as impartial as I could and run them through randomly. So if your app did not get picked this time, we're going to be doing this every month from now on, and we're going to be alternating between games and apps. So continue submitting it. Eventually, I'll get to it. If not, shoot me an email. Many of you have talked to me before and asked me questions. I'm always open to that. So what we're going to do here is, first, I'm going to go through my process in 3 or 4 slides so you have an idea of what we're going to be looking at. And then we'll just jump right into it and look at those apps that I picked at random out of the list and do a teardown for. Before we even jump into this, though, I wanted to mention one thing, and that is last week I started a new podcast. I don't know if you've seen it already. If you haven't, we'll dump a link in the chat so you can check it out. The podcast is about app news. I do a roundup every week on Friday. I had it as a newsletter. I still have it as a newsletter, but I wanted to do even more for people who don't necessarily want to read this in their inbox and instead would like to listen. And so now we have the newsletter as a newsletter and as a podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and all the podcasts. So if you like podcasts and you like app news, check it out. Now, on to the teardown. So you know who I am already. I'm the co-founder and the CEO, and at this point also the chief analyst, because I like to look at a lot of stuff. And what that gives me is a broad overview and understanding of what apps do that works, what apps do that doesn't work, and what apps don't do, which is really, I think, the biggest problem. And here's my process for how to do that. So I mentioned what an app teardown is. I do an app teardown every week on Tuesday. That's a different newsletter that I have. You may have seen those. People really love those, and I try to extract as much knowledge and wisdom both about the process and about highlighting things that are good or bad so you don't have to make those mistakes. And you can duplicate what works well. We'll have a link to that as well if you haven't seen it. So the thing about ASO is, and I've said this to anyone who asks me, I see it as part art, part science. And the reason for that is there is data, a good amount of data, but a lot of it, interpreting it, is not necessarily as straightforward, meaning a higher number of one thing is not necessarily better, and a lower number of another is not necessarily worse. And if you remember last month's webinar where I talked to Ben, he also had this same sort of idea that numbers are great to give you an idea of what's going on, but it's really up to you to figure out what to do with those numbers. So the way I see it is, it's iterative. You have an idea, you check the numbers, you put them in action, and you see what's going on. So trial and error. But trial and error is slow, and I don't know anyone that likes things the slow way. So the easiest way to go about this is to look what's happening in the store already, whether it's Google Play or the App Store. Everyone who's doing ASO is really in the same boat. So whether they're doing ASO or not doing ASO, you can learn from them, and you can shortcut the whole trial and error process and learn off of other people's trial and errors. Trial and error, not errors. So that's a part of my process. So what I do, and this is really the simplest way to go about it, is, one, I look for any obvious mistakes. And if you're wondering what an obvious mistake is, I have multiple guides on what's good and what's bad, whether it's in the name of the app, in the screenshots, and we can link to those as well. But I look for those, and those will scream out. And when we look at the apps that we're going to do the teardowns for, we might see them. And then I apply best practices. Best practices are great because they give you a starting point. They're not necessarily always applicable, and in some cases, they're actually not good. But those are rare. So best practices are usually my go-to move. And then I look for tricks. And when I say tricks, it's not something that's black hat. It's not something that's illegal and will get you thrown out of the store. But it's just a little pieces of little nuggets of wisdom that I've learned over the years, just doing this enough times and seeing what works. And it doesn't always work, and that's why I call it a trick. It works in some cases. And when I look at competitors, I'm actually able to see if that's something that we should use or shouldn't. And that's the fun part. I make assumptions about how we can take this to the next level, and the assumptions are based off of knowledge and experience, but at the same time, they're also based on curiosity and kind of the desire to try something that I may have not done before or I may have not seen before. And that gives me an idea of, can I do this in general? That's the trial and error part, and that has to happen if you want to continue and advance everything. And then beyond that, I use the tools to validate all of my assumptions and see how everything works out. So the tools that I use and the tools that I will be using today are one keyword inspector, which shows search results based on a keyword in the App Store and Google Play for any country that I choose. And the cool thing about it is not only is it giving me results, but it's overlaying some information. So it's showing me the importance and relevance of a keyword. It's showing me app intelligence on the apps, and you'll see how important that is for knowing what you can attack, what's feasible for you to optimize for, and what isn't. And then I'm going to use competitor intelligence to create a benchmark. Again, continuing with what I can and can't do and what I should and shouldn't do. And then I'm going to use competitor keywords, which is really the easiest way to map out who's using what keywords and how is that working out for them. So let's do it. Hopefully you can still see my screen. The first app that I chose from the list is this one, Strength Training, FitnessAI. And fitness has become such a huge trend because of COVID and because people are stuck at home. And so home fitness, home workouts, home exercises, all those keywords have become really popular on the App Store. So it makes a lot of sense for an app like this with quite a few ratings, 34,000, and a high rating average to be doing well. Now, I'm looking at this, and let me try and get a better idea for what this app does. So you're going to get stronger with AI. I love the idea of AI being used for as many things as possible, but at the same time, I think that it's something that needs to happen, not necessarily something that needs to be advertised, because most people don't know. Fun fact, I A/B tested the concept of using AI on our website for ASO tools. So we use machine learning and other things that can be described as AI for our App Store optimization tools. For example, in Keyword Inspector, which I just mentioned, we can give you other relevant keywords. We call them related keywords. And so, I can see you and active screen. Sorry, I got distracted by a mention on the chat. I'll figure that out in a little bit. What I was going to say is that we show additional relevant keywords that you can optimize for in case the one that you're looking at doesn't fit. Maybe it's got too many downloads for competitors. Maybe it's not competitive enough. These sort of things. And so, so we try to use that. And I looked for whether we'll get more signups if we mention that we use AI, whether we against not versus not. And the results were interesting. I don't think it had any significant change because I think the idea is that whatever you use, if you call it smart, if you call it intelligent, if you call it AI, it's kind of the same. But that was just a tangent off of something I saw in the name. So if I'm looking at this app, it's doing something that has to do with workouts. There is body of a person lifting something. So I imagine it gives me fitness exercises ideas. It does something with my gym, and it tailors workout plans. So when I said the first thing that I do is look for mistakes, my first mistake is I'm confused. what is going on here? So maybe if we look for strength training in Inspector, I'll see that all apps are doing the same thing, and that's in a next step. But so far, I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. And I think that's called friction. Friction is I come into this with an expectation or intent, and the screenshots, the icon, the name, the subtitle don't immediately say you're in the right place. You should download this app. So that's a problem. That's a problem because you're going to work so hard at making sure that people find you. And then once they find you, they're going to come here and they're going to be like, what is going on? Is that what I'm looking for? And if the answer is, I'm not sure, you lost the download. So all the work that you did on optimizing keywords is down the drain. And so that's something that can definitely be improved, I think, here with clarity. So before we even go into Keyword Inspector to figure out what's going on here, my first thought is strength training is cool, but it's not something that a mom who's stuck at home now because of lockdowns will be looking for. I do see personal trainer, and that sounds good to me. And I'm thinking maybe personal trainer and workout plan are actually more important and more popular, but that's where we need data. So I'm going to use those as assumptions, and then I'm going to verify them. So a few things I want to look at already. In my mind, I want to look at home workouts, the addition of home to all of this, personal trainer, strength training, weight training, because I do see weights in both of these screenshots. Makes me think that maybe weights are a strong component of this. And then I want to see what would happen when I throw AI, so exercise AI, workout AI, these sort of things. Why? Because I just want to get an idea of what's going on. The name, the brand behind this is FitnessAI, so we can't change it. The question is, how much of it do we want to show off with? That's kind of my question. And then I see keywords that have to do with gym here. So gym, check-ins, I don't know if that's going to have any sort of real relevance. Tailored workout plans. I see workouts, plans. So there's enough to go off of here to give me an idea of what to look for. But at this point, step number one, I think I have a good starting point. Let's see if there are any questions. No questions. Okay, so far so good. If you do have any questions, let me know. So let's jump into Keyword Inspector, if my computer will allow me to do that. And let's look for strength training. And all this is happening in real time. So, for example, what's happening now is that because we do this in real time on the site, and I'm not using anything predefined here, we're actually going to the App Store in the US and we're looking for strength training, both information about the keyword. So popularity, we're going to be computing competitiveness score, looking at the number of results. Did I say straining? Yes, I did. Okay. Well, I did say this is real time. And we're also going to be looking at all the results. So all of this happened right now. If you go to the App Store and you're in the US on your iPhone, you should see the same results. But let me fix this. So we know that strength training is very low popularity. We probably don't optimize for this. And undo this, and let's do this again. And strength training is kind of popular, which is good. Competitiveness is pretty high, which is also good. And look at this. The app we're looking at is number one. I did not do this beforehand. I promise you. But that's good. That's actually great. So let's see who's up against this app. So we have Fitbod, Workout, and Fitness Plan. So Plans is back. Workout is back, just as we saw in those other screenshots. Workouts by Muscle Booster. So workouts seems to be a pretty important keyword. And I think that's what I'm going to look at next. Smart Gym, gym and home workout. So gym is back. So all these keywords that we saw in the screenshots are being used by competitors, which is making me feel that Jake has done this sort of analysis before and is using these keywords correctly, which is great. Gymshark, training, fitness. Okay, so even though we're not doing an analysis of Gymshark, putting app in your name is not very useful. It's a waste of 3 characters and a space, depends on where it is. Just a side note, if you have that in your app's name, don't do it. And I say don't do it not because I know that it doesn't work. It's because the algorithm actually ignores it completely. So when Apple's algorithm looks at this, it'll see Gymshark, it'll see training, it'll see fitness, and that's where it ends. It's not going to see app at all. Apple actually states that. Apple doesn't say many things about how its algorithm works, but that's one of the few things that it does mention on its website, to not use the word app. And in my experience, it hasn't added any sort of benefit. So, okay, strength training, we said work. Straining, not so much. But let's look at something else. So, workout plan, and we'll look at workout plans as well, seems to be in the name of some competitors. So we see that it's a little bit less popular, 34 versus 29. And FitnessAI is actually number 8. And that's because, look where it is. It's at the end of the subtitle. The title or the name is most important. The subtitle is less important. And the position in the name or the subtitle also makes a difference. And so the closer it is to the beginning, the more important it's going to be. And if you, just by eyeballing this list, you can see it. In the name, already important. In the name, already important. In the name, in the name. In the names too, in the name, and only then we go here. So that's pretty interesting. And then this app has it in the name, but it doesn't continue to plan. And so that's where everything is lost. Planner is not the same as plan, and on and on and on. This is an interesting one. So we got workout and plan in the name, but it's doing very poorly in comparison. And that's most likely because they're not optimizing their keyword list correctly. It's also possible that has to do with the ratings difference. If you look at the number of ratings here versus number of ratings here, it's vastly different. So for those of you who were not aware, downloads are an incredibly important part of where your app will rank, even if you do as good a job as your nearest competitor with keywords. You optimize properly, it's in the beginning and the name, everything else is perfect. But if you have fewer downloads, you're usually going to rank below. But ratings are also an important and super important, I forgot the word I was looking for. They're a super important part of ranking. And so if you have fewer downloads, but at the same time you have more new ratings, new positive ratings, you can outrank a competitor. So if you're thinking I have a tenth of the downloads of my nearest competitor, I can never even try to rank for a keyword, a specific keyword, the answer is no. It's going to be difficult. But if you manage to get more new ratings over a short period of time of, let's say, a week or maybe 2 weeks, you'll be able to outrank them, and that hopefully will give you more exposure, more downloads, if everything else on the page is making it clear what the app does, reduces friction, and then you can get to a point where you have more downloads. More downloads, you can be a much stronger competitor, and you don't need to outmatch your ratings consistently. So it's kind of a cycle that you have the ability to change. Now, I'm not saying go and buy ratings. It's easy. It's simple. And if you are on Twitter, you will know that there's at least one developer who's trying to make sure everyone knows about apps that are buying ratings and using that to change their ranks. But what I am saying is there are proper ways to get better ratings from your existing users. We have a guide on that too. Surprise, surprise. And so you should use those and really work on optimizing the process, the way in which you ask, when you trigger, and how you ask for a new rating. Now, if you have very few users, there's a different way to get more users so you can get more ratings, so you can get more better ranks, but that's for a different place and time altogether. So now we have kind of a vague idea of what's going on in the space. I'm going to go back to strength training because it looks like that is a good group, and I'm going to use competitor intelligence to figure out what everyone is kind of up to, and we can look at downloads and we can look at ratings and we can see how those compare. Now, while we wait for this, if you haven't used these tools already, at the end of this, I'm going to post for a very brief moment a discount code that's only available to people who are attending the webinar live. It's going to be cut out of the recording. So if you want to give those a try, you can. And our plans don't lock you into anything, so you can just use it for a little bit while you optimize your app, while you get around and figure out what your competitors are doing, their keywords and everything else, and then go back to your current plan. And if you're not using App Figures yet, now's a great time to sign up. And the discount code is going to work for everyone who is in this webinar. Can you see revenue? Daniel, if you're talking about revenue estimates, yes. If you're looking at your own revenue, you can also do that. We track on the analytics side everything that has to do with your apps, your subscriptions, and everything else. We have a really good subscriptions report. And for competitors, we'll do downloads and revenue estimates. So let's take a closer look at what's going on. FitnessAI is not the top app when it comes to ratings, yet it was #1 for that keyword, and it outranked all of these. And if we look at the number of ratings, they're doing pretty well. Not as well as these guys. So these guys are probably not as optimized. And that we can see it, there's no plan. So there's workouts, but no plan. And that's why they're getting beat on this. We can see this over time. Let's take a look at new ratings over time. And this is specifically in the US, so all these numbers are US only. And we can see Fitbot is doing pretty well for the most part, but FitnessAI has just recently gotten a boost in ratings, and that's likely what's making Apple rank it better. So when this boost goes away, it'll probably, because it doesn't have the downloads to compete, it'll probably drop. But now it has the boost, so great. And that goes back to what I was saying before. You can always compete, whether you have the downloads or don't have the downloads. But if you actually have something else that can balance it out, you'll be fine. And we can see how that spans over countries. We don't care about countries at this point. So now that we have a slightly better idea of who's doing what and how it's working out, let's take a look at the keywords that they're all using. So this is going to give us a quick summary, and then I'm going to click through to the competitor keywords report so we can do some filtering. And again, real time. Let's see, I see a question in the chat. So a question from Chris about variance between estimates in revenue between different companies that exist in this space. I can't really get into too much detail because it's extremely complicated how we do what we do, but there are different reasons. The main reason why we're different than others, and that's something that I get very often on our revenue estimates, is we calculate the net revenue. And most other companies that I've seen, I don't think I've seen a single company that does net revenue. Everyone does gross revenue. The reason we do net revenue, and net being the revenue the app is making after Apple and Google take their cut, is because with subscriptions, now with the small business program by Apple and with the change that Google announced yesterday, there are different rates. And so when I, as a developer, care about how much money my competitor is making, I kind of care about how much money they're making after all the costs that they have to pay. So not after their employees or anything else, but after what Apple and Google take. And so that's why we calculate net. And so when a competitor calculates gross, it's going to be immediately 15% or 30% higher. It depends on the app, and it depends on the subscription, and it depends on whether it's a subscription that's been around for more than a year or less than a year. And so we aim to take all of those questions out of the equation, and by definition, that's going to make the net revenue lower. It doesn't make it inaccurate. It just means that it's net after the store. And Lucas is asking if the revenue is in-app purchases or ads. We only look at revenue that comes from the app directly. So app downloads, if it's a paid app, and in-app purchases. And the reason we don't do ads is because that's a whole different kind of model, and that requires a whole different set of tools, which is very difficult to get right. Not because we don't have the right tools, but mostly because the data is so vast. And we're working on getting to that point, but everything that we've seen so far is not accurate enough. We have a very high bar for accuracy, and we aim to never give you something that it's as good of a guess, because the developers that work with us are making decisions with their own money spending on advertising and development, and we don't want to steer them the wrong way. So we'd much rather not give information that we know we can't get accurate. One more question. Actually, when I figures to get my own net revenue, couldn't find it on the Play Store console. So, yes, Google Play, for all the weird data that it gives, and for a console that after the redesign looks great, makes the data really strange to find. I know because I even struggle to find our own data for our Android app. We have an Android app. And so I look at it maybe once in a blue moon. It gets even worse for subscriptions. I mean, this is a tangent of me just railing on Google, but when it comes to subscriptions, the data from Google Play is so limited. They don't give you churn. They don't give you all the numbers that you actually need to run a business. And it becomes really difficult to make decisions. We do. So if you want to do that, you can take a look. So going back to the teardown, let me move all my screens. So we can quickly see from here the kind of keywords that these apps are ranking for. And let me go into the full report because a summary is not good enough. We're doing a real analysis here, and we're not just trying to look at competitors. And in the meantime, I'll answer some questions. Andreas asked if it works for other countries, and the answer is yes. You can select a different country from here. You can also select Google Play. You can select the different devices, and it will be pretty much the same analysis, but based off of the country. We automatically look for new keywords from popular apps. So we update the database ongoingly throughout the day, every day, across different categories and countries and stores. So you will have as many keywords as possible for all of your competitors. Amin is saying, it seems a bit of a chicken and egg situation. Without keyword ranking, you won't get downloads, and without downloads, you won't ever go up the keyword rankings. Yes, that's actually partially true. Not partially, that's very true. The way to kickstart this is you have to get some downloads, and then you have to convert those some downloads into ratings. Those ratings will give you better rankings. Those rankings will give you more downloads or more visibility that will lead to more downloads. So that's kind of the idea. Now, there are many ways to get more downloads. You can go out and buy some ads on Google or on Facebook or on Instagram or one of those. You can also go and spend time to do it organically. We have a guide on that as well. You can use Apple search ads. And so between all of those, you can kickstart your downloads for a very small amount of money, or a lot of your own time and effort, sweat equity, as some may call it. And once you do that, it's really important then to focus on getting users to rate your app. And as we just saw with FitnessAI, those ratings do turn into better rankings, which will turn into more downloads. So you have full control over the cycle, but it is a cycle. So now what we're looking at, we'll go back to this, is we're looking at all the keywords that all of these apps together, and these are the top 5 apps for strength training, the keyword, are ranking in. Now, we're going to see a lot of noise here just because strength and training are pretty, I would say, pretty general at the end of the day and pretty useful. So let's filter them out a little bit. I want to see only keywords that are slightly popular. And I want to see areas where apps are in, let's say, the top 30, top 40. We'll leave it at top 40. And this gives me a much better idea of what's going on now. So I can go off of, if I am FitnessAI trying to do this, I'm going to sort by my ranks and see who's directly competing with me. And we can see that here. And we can also see what are they doing that I'm not doing. So personal trainer, which is in FitnessAI's subtitle, is just in a subtitle. And that's why we're number 8 when Fitbod is number 1. We can quickly see that the popularity is 34, which is very similar to strength training. So strength training. And so I may not actually care about it as much because I have a good keyword under my belt. Instead, I can also look at the popularity in Apple Watch. Interesting. And I can look at all the different keywords that are very popular. So we have home workout. I had a hunch about home workout before we started this. FitnessAI is not even ranking in home workout. Fitbod, which is number 2 in that particular search, is actually number 16 here. So what I see here is opportunity. And to understand what the opportunity is like, I may have to go and investigate this app a little bit more. This is workouts by Muscle Booster. I want to look for more. So what I call these keyword gaps. They're gaps because they're pretty popular. Some competitors are ranking for them, or at least trying to rank for them, and I'm not at all. Maybe I'm trying and it's not working. Maybe I'm not trying at all. But these are great opportunities because I know that they would have some sort of a return if I go into them. We're down to gym, which is 44, number 10. Again, this is an opportunity for growth, especially when my nearest competitor is 437. So now what I have is I have a great idea of one, what keywords work, two, where I am versus the competition, and three, the sort of themes that I want to be aiming for. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to look at what's the most feasible for me. Feasible for me meaning based off of my downloads, my new ratings, and also another thing that I want to look at is the number of apps that are being ranked for the keyword. Obviously, something that has 4,000 results is going to be harder for me to get into versus 60 results. You're not going to find 60 results for something that is popular unless it's a brand name like Gymshark. So those are not going to be easy to come by, but you'll find hundreds. You'll find maybe low thousands. Keep in mind that this is not really an absolute scale. It would be much easier if you do this on a rolling scale. So 200,000 is worse than 16,000 in this case. So if I have to look at some of these, I would be much more comfortable going for these fit and gym workout in comparison to something like workout apps. Hit workouts. This is a cool gem. I mean, such a small number of competitors. It's quite competitive, but at the same time, 44 popularity is actually really nice. So this is a good find. This is what I would call a keyword opportunity. I don't think there are that many apps that are targeting hit. As you can see, 2,000 is much lower than most of these numbers. These are in the thousands, high-ish thousands. And so I want to at least try this. Now, what I can do, the easiest way to do this would be to bring this back into Keyword Inspector and see, again, who's competing, what sort of downloads, what sort of ratings, and see if I can fit into this. And if I can, great, let's do it. If I can't, then I can find related keywords that could be useful. Now, if I can fit into it, another thing that I like to do is look at how other competitors are fitting it into their name, whether it's in the beginning, in the subtitle, at the end, in the middle. And using that, I can get an idea of what I need to do. So, I mean, here I can quickly see that hit workouts, it's going to be very difficult to become number one unless I put it in the beginning of the name. I can become number two fairly easily. I mean, look at the number of apps that are targeting hit directly. It's very small. Everything else is probably using the keyword list that we can't see. So even though they have 10 times the download of FitnessAI, if FitnessAI sticks hit in the name of their app, or even in the subtitle at this point, it will work wonderfully. Now, I don't know if FitnessAI actually does hit, so that's something that I would need to know before I do this, and I would not recommend optimizing for terms that are not actually relevant to the app, because what's going to happen is people are going to find the app, they're going to download it, and when they see it doesn't do what they want, they're going to get really mad. So even if they could have used your app for something else, if hit is what they're looking for and they can't find it, they'll most likely delete it. On the Apple side, that's not the end of the world, because if someone deletes the app, that only means that they're not going to get your app. On Google side, that's a signal. And so if you have a lot of downloads that end up in uninstalls immediately, Google thinks that your app is no good, and you will see your ranks decrease. And your ranks across the board are going to decrease, not just your keyword ranks, but also your category ranks. So it's a total loss, and I would highly recommend not to do that. And that's really at a high level how I would go after finding new keywords, understanding where I'm ranked, and creating a benchmark for me and my competitors for FitnessAI. The next app that I have that came from our selection is Conversion Calculator Units. Let's take a look and see what are the issues that are here. What are the obvious issues, I would say, and then we'll run through a similar process. Now, this is a much different type of app. The intent here is very different. You would use it in a different way. And so I want to say everything about it is kind of different. And so the first thing that I see when I look at this is, what is this? What is the brand behind this? Who's making this? Is it just one of those random apps that will do conversions? And if so, hey, great. But I find that it's easier to rank, or it's easier to continue the momentum for something you're building a strategy for when you have a brand. And here I don't see a brand. It's a conversion calculator, comma units. I don't know if this is a typo. I mean, I know it isn't, but as a user, I'm not exactly trained to look at app names as App Store optimization names. And so for me, this kind of looks weird. It's maybe not a terrible thing because attention spans are really short at this point, and so I would not necessarily say this is a terrible thing to do. But for me personally, it's a pet peeve to see an app name that was made for the algorithm and not for the humans that are going to be downloading it. And if you read my teardowns every week when I find one of those, that's one of the things that I point out immediately because this is not exactly readable. If it was only conversion calculator, then it would be fine. Now, here's the interesting bit. The interesting bit is that you don't have to, even though I say usually use all 30 characters of the name and the subtitle, in some situations you don't want to do that. So that's going back to those principles, basic principles that sometimes go against you. Because the algorithm uses everything in the name and the subtitle, and it assigns weights based on the position, it also cares about the length. And so if you're using more keywords in the name and the subtitle, you're really diluting the amount of weight you're putting on one keyword versus another. Now, that's normally not an issue. Most keywords are not that competitive that this would be noticeable. It's a tiny, tiny fraction. But in something like a conversion calculator, I have a feeling that it is pretty difficult. One, it's not hard to think about the concept of a conversion calculator. Two, it's one of those things where if you think about, I'm going to build an app, what should I do? Everyone needs a conversion calculator at some point, whether you're cooking or building or designing or whatever it is that you're doing. And so if I'm thinking about an app that I want to make right now, a conversion calculator doesn't sound like a terrible option. So the store is probably flooded with them. Whether they're good is a whole other thing. Building a good app versus just building an app is, again, a matter for a different webinar. But for the most part, they will exist. And so I already see that the name and the subtitle were made just for the algorithm, but not like super optimized. And let me look at the screenshots and see what's going on. The screenshots are actually pretty okay. They're readable. The font is huge, but it works. I don't like this uncertainty, almost any type of unit. I would just say all. The odds of someone finding a unit that cannot be converted are probably really, really, really slim. So those people, we'll worry about them later. But for the most part, if I'm reading almost any type, now it's making me immediately consider this as, I don't want something that has almost any type. I want something that has all. And I bet you there's a competitor that's saying all. As simple as using a calculator, that's pretty cool. I think that's simple and catchy. Make conversion even offline. If anything, that should be way higher up because I think that has great value. Set favorites for fast conversions. This is really cool. So these screenshots are telling the story of the app, and they're selling it to me. Like, plain and simple. And I can also see that they're using all... Is this 10? I did not count. Yeah, this is 10. 4 and 2. 10 or 9. 9. Which is good. If you don't have any more screenshots that have these titles on them, just use regular screenshots. This is very clever. I like this. I like this a lot. And so now let's take a look. So let's go back to Keyword Inspector, and this time I'm not going to mistype the keyword I'm looking for, and we'll do conversion calculator. There was a question about whether the App Store ranks apps with higher revenue better. I don't think revenue has anything to do with keyword ranks, for the obvious reason that there is common sense there's logic to how the algorithm works. And for the algorithm to work off of revenue, it would mean that it would give more of a benefit to apps that have in-app purchases or subscriptions or paid apps, and would kind of put aside free apps. So apps that are just branded, like the App Figures app that doesn't make any revenue directly through the app, would always get pushed down. And I don't think Apple or Google would want to do that. There's really no reason for them to do it well. Let's take a look at more questions. Carrie's asking, what is the timeline to get data for other countries that might not show up originally? And the answer is, please drop us an email and let us know which countries specifically you want. We're working to get intelligence across the board. So we do tracking for all the countries, all the 175 and the 143 or 152 that Google does. for keyword ranks. If you want the intelligence on them, we have a smaller list, and we keep on improving that list and growing that list. So if you have countries that you would like us to optimize or like us to move forward to the top of the list, please let us know. There's a question from Scott who's asking if there is value in grouping keywords. For example, should Apple keywords have hit and workout separated or hit workout combined? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by this. I think that you can break them up as long as they're in the name and subtitle, but again, depends on how the competitors are. So if the competitors are putting hit in the name, you'd have to do that to rank well. If the competitors are doing hit and workout in the name, you'd have to do that as well. If I remember correctly, only one app did that, and so you can probably break them up between the name and the subtitle. I would try not to go any farther than that, meaning not use it in the keyword list instead. You can use it in the keyword list in addition to, but not instead. And that's how I would do it. Specifically in keywords separated by a comma. Yes, I would say always break up the keywords. There's really no reason to group keywords. But keep in mind that the separation in the name and the subtitle are basically off of a space, whereas in the keyword list, it's off of a comma. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so we have some results for conversion calculator, and well, look at this. We're starting off with a 41, which is a pretty good popularity. And our app is number 7. So good. It's a starting point, I would say, for something like this. But let's analyze the top 5 results and see what they're doing and where they're putting their name in this. And we'll add our app as well because it's not in the top 5. So we're going to do an analysis of 6 apps. Justin is asking if it's beneficial to repeat keywords that are used in the name or subtitle in the keyword list. And the answer is yes. It's a controversial answer because most places you go to, most experts you ask these days will tell you it's not and has no benefit. I have seen enough data to suggest that in some cases it does. And because the algorithm takes a lot of different components and all of different inputs into consideration when ranking, it's very difficult to say with certainty that something definitely doesn't work. So if we say that something definitely doesn't work, we have to be sure. I am sure that putting the word app in your name is not going to work because ignored. I'm pretty sure about how to optimize the keyword list because I've seen that in action. But I've seen cases where duplicating names or duplicating keywords between the name subtitle and the keyword list. So not twice in the name or once in the name, once in the subtitle, but once in the name or subtitle and once in the keyword list actually helps. If you have a lot of keywords that you want to target, that might be something that you should experiment with later. But if you are very focused on one specific keyword or a very small number of keywords, I would highly suggest to try it. And with everything I say try something, and if it doesn't work, you can stop it at any time. If it does work, you can do more of it. So it's not that trial and error is bad. It's trial and error is great, but it just takes time. So if you can learn from a competitor, use that instead. And if you can't, then trial and error on your own. That's how I would approach this. Tal is asking a quick question. Is it okay to use the amp sign in the title or description? The answer is yes. The description is completely ignored for Apple, and Google does an amazing job reading it. But in both cases, the amp works. I would separate it with a space just to be on the safe side. Not to be on the safe side for the amp in a space, but for me, so you don't misunderstand what I'm saying, and not combine a word and amp in another word. I've seen that before, and I think that's a way of saving space and saying and without eliminating 3 characters and just 1. That's pretty bad, and I would not recommend doing that. Again, you can really experiment with this if you want, but I don't think that's going to give you any sort of benefit. One more question. Should long-tail keywords be included in keywords list with a space, hit workouts? Does it signal a stronger intent to the App Store versus just using commas? Absolutely not. The idea of space is just wasteful. And so you're going to, one, narrow down what the algorithm sees, and at the same time also eat up a whole bunch of characters because now hit and workout cannot be used to combine with other keywords. So that's a no-no. All right, so we have some data. Let's take a look at it. So let's add our app. Conversion calculator. Comma units. And see where it ranks in the grand scheme of these competitors. We do not have an estimate for it, which means that it's probably doing less good than 1.2 thousand downloads. And most likely because it's not ranked. And so we have an app here that could use a big boost. And again, going back to what we were saying before about the vicious cycle of downloads and ratings, what I would do if I am conversion calculator, comma units, is spend time on taking however many users I do have and however many downloads I do have and really getting them to leave a rating after I optimize for all the right keywords. So let's see what that means. So we have an idea of what's going on. These are not that many downloads, so it's not going to be that crazy to compete with. And this is actually interesting because conversion calculator is kind of a high popularity keyword. So I think there's more opportunity here for the right app. Let's take a look at keywords and see where they stand. Now, again, all this data is based in the US, and this means English keywords for the most part. So if any of these apps are doing amazingly well in other countries or really poorly in other countries, we're not going to see it here. But that's because our analysis is focused on a single country. When it comes to App Store optimization, optimizing for one country doesn't necessarily carry over to others. And so your rankings, your ratings, your downloads, all those are specific to a country. So when you do this, you should really be doing this across one country at a time. You can do multiple countries at a time, but they would still be siloed by country. And another interesting bit, when I do this outside of the US, I'll usually see a lot of keywords in English, specifically in this report. And that's because, especially on the App Store, users still are looking for words in English, as interesting and maybe weird as that sounds. And if you go through the top apps, just browsing on your phone, you'll see that a lot of apps are actually using English keywords in their name. So maybe they're not localizing, or maybe they're targeting those keywords, either or, but that's a real thing. So now, here's the interesting stuff that we can see here. With a currency calculator, which is different than something like the fitness app, we'll see maybe slightly more focused intents. So I'm not looking for a unit calculator or for a conversion calculator. I'm looking for a currency calculator, or I'm looking for a money calculator, money conversion, or I'm looking for things that specifically have to do with the one unit I care about. And that's why I think saying almost every unit might be cheeky or might be like cute from a developer standpoint, but from a consumer standpoint, almost is not good. Almost is almost good, and no one wants to be almost good. And so what I would do is I would switch it. What I'm seeing here immediately is that a good way to reduce friction is most likely to tell people what kind of conversions they can do and focus on the ones that are most popular. So let's see if we can find that by just sorting by popularity. So we have money seems to be dominating this. Temperature, currency, tape measure, interesting. So things that have to do with distances, cooking. So I can quickly see that these are probably the top 3, 4, 5 things that people care about most if we look at the popularity. So aside from just optimizing for those keywords, I would also maybe take up one screenshot where I show a list of all the different units and say something in the title or in the caption along the lines of convert any unit that you can think of or something like that, and then list out maybe a few, maybe on the side or maybe on the bottom, maybe as an overlay. And so if I'm a user, even if we didn't optimize for currency conversion and I find the app through a conversion calculator, when I see it for the first time, I'm immediately going to see that it's going to convert currencies for me. And if that's what I want, boom, no more questions. I'm probably not even going to continue and looking at all the screenshots because I got what I want. If I find temperature conversion, boom. So that's an immediate win. Now, of course, I would use all these keywords to optimize for. I would find the top handful and put them in the name and the subtitle. And then I would also take everything else and use it as long tail in the keyword list. And so just going back here quickly. So conversion calculator units convert miles, inches, currency. This is the beginning of something like that. This, I think, can be improved a little bit to get around that. And then we can, again, use those users to get ratings. And once we have all those keywords in place, I think it would be much easier to get this app to rank so we can have an estimate for it. So I ran through this one a little bit more quickly because we're running out of time. I'm glad I chose to do 2 instead of 3. Maybe next one we'll just have to do 1 and go in a bit more depth. I'll probably ask that in a survey when we're done with this. So that's my process. That's how I do this, and that's how I use the tools. There are a few more bells and whistles that I try to look at when I have more time that I didn't get to this time. Hopefully I'll get to next month in our next webinar. And speaking of new webinars, I'm doing this again next week. Not a live app teardown, but I'll be interviewing an ASO expert who has made the shift from games, App Store optimization for games, to App Store optimization at a real estate company, which is pretty cool. So keep an eye out for an invitation. That's happening next Wednesday, I believe, or Thursday. Next week. We'll go with next week. We're doing them back to back this time. And then starting next month, we'll be doing again 2. So one of these and also an interview. And we have a pretty good lineup of interesting people from all around the industry to talk to about App Store optimization, about conversions, and about pretty much everything else you can think of that has to do with app marketing. Whoa, what happened to my screen? We're good. And that is pretty much it. I will see you next week.